So there's a Johnny Harris video that I want to watch. Oh, fuck. There's so much. There's so much good shit. There's a Johnny Harris video that I want to watch that he deleted. Apparently, in the video, he talks about why people say NATO is the reason why Russia invaded Ukraine. But because people were really pissed at him, he was forced to delete the video. Okay? So we found the video, and I kind of want to watch it. And I don't know why he shame deleted it, because the last time he shame deleted a video, last time Johnny Harris shame deleted a video, it wasn't even a video at all. It was actually correct. It was like a correct take about it was a correct take about how he posted about how settlers are anticipating or trying to go, Israeli settlers are trying to go into southern Lebanon. And he was like, this is this is really fucked up. This is not allowed. And everyone was like, that's really messed up. You shouldn't say that. And he apologized for it. But let's see what this one was.
It's the 1990s. The two great empires have been facing off for 5 decades. But after years of propaganda, walls, tanks, coups, and fear, and spies, and nuclear tests, and a lot of close calls, this Cold War finally started to thaw, and quickly. Here's President Ronald Reagan walking out of a building in Iceland with the leader of the Soviet Union. They're talking about peace.
We have an agreement, sir!
Will you meet again?
And they did meet again. Look, here's Ronald Reagan in Moscow, the enemy's capital. After Reagan, George Bush Sr. kept up the momentum towards peace. People were ecstatic.
I will always say this, but I think America eliminating its enemy in USSR actually caused it to not have any sort of counterbalance on the planet that would rein it in some meaningful ways. And that's why it marked the beginning of the end. The neoliberal era in the post-90s quite literally is the reason why America is on a downtrend.
Walls came down, armies stepped aside, world f***ing peace seemed achievable for the first time in human history. And they called it the end of history, the triumph of liberal democracy, spreading throughout
even he recognizes old Francis was like, I was wrong about that.
The triumph of liberal democracy, spreading throughout the globe, that would surely lead to the end of conflict and of empires, prosperity and peace above power and war. Pretty inspirational stuff, right? Yeah, well, it didn't happen like that, unfortunately. What we thought was going to happen didn't happen. Today, countries are once again preparing for war. They're cutting ties with each other, and the world is looking a lot more like those.
Why did you just randomly start revealing power level? What are you talking about? What power level? There's nothing. None of my positions are a secret. I'm very annoying and very stubborn in everything that I advocate for.
Old Cold War days. So what happened? Could we have avoided this? And whose fault, if anyone's, was all of this? Here in the political West, we mostly blame Russia and China for greedily trying to disrupt the US-led rules-based order that has brought the world so much peace. They are the bad guys. But what if that's wrong? Half of the people watching this video just opened up a new tab and typed, Johnny Harris funded by Russian government, ? But seriously, this...
Didn't he delete this video for misinformation? Why not watch it when he re-releases it? I wanted to watch the video first and then watch his apology later and see what he said was misinformation.
This video is going to be controversial because I'm going to...
Chatter talking about how you don't talk about Marxism in a CNN interview or something, which is the normal thing to do. I know. It's called being a normal human being. That's not me hiding my power level. I don't think there's no issue with tackling these problems in an academic setting. It's just there's a time and place for it. And I don't think when I'm asked a question about the Democratic Party's failures in the election cycle, that I have to start talking about seizing the means of production. You know what I mean? It's just, what do I always tell you? Read the room, be normal.
Talk about a narrative that we don't talk about much in the West, but I feel like is vital for us to understand and to explore. Today, I'm intentionally going to take off my normal lens of my biases and my versions of history that I'm exposed to most, and intentionally put on a different lens, seeing a version of history where the West isn't necessarily the good guy in recent decades. I'm doing this because I think this kind of thinking is exactly how we better understand each other.
Oh my God, I agree with him. What the fuck? Did this man read like a Mersheimer book or something? What's happening? This is...
how we can better understand how we got ourselves into another Cold War. And I think from this narrative, though I don't agree with every aspect of it, I think there are lessons we can learn. Lessons that hopefully can help us avoid another catastrophic global conflict. As always, the sources for every assertion in this video are in a document that is linked in the description. And with that, let me show you how the West created the new Cold War.
I mean, if he does a 27-minute video entirely dedicated to NATO expansion, not featuring like Operation Gladio, not featuring like all of the other meaningful ways in which NATO has propped up fascist movements in the aftermath of World War II, but instead specifically on NATO encroaching on, Russian territory and threatening Russian territorial sovereignty, I don't even think I would agree with that assessment. Like, I don't think I would agree with the assessment that like it is entirely because of NATO that it's entirely because of NATO that Vladimir Putin said Ukraine is actually, just means the border and it's a part of Russia historically. And we must go back to 1,000 years of history when, it was firmly in the bosom of Russian Empire. So we'll see.
Okay, so the year is 1991. The Cold War is over, thanks in large part to this guy, who we saw earlier being all lovey-dovey with Reagan and Bush. Mikhail Gorbachev was the last Soviet leader, and he was laser-focused on peace, on de-escalating tensions between the two empires.
Gorbachev said, look, guys, this Cold War, we don't need it. We need to move beyond it, especially in the age of nuclear war, which could destroy all of humanity.
That's Richard Sakwa, an expert on the geopolitics of this time, whose book is a rigorous academic argument for the narrative I'm exploring today.
The Cold War ended, the Berlin Wall came down, the Soviet Union disintegrated into 15 other states.
The biggest of those countries was Russia, which was the continuation of the Soviet Union's government. The answer was clear for most people. The United States and its allies were the victors in this war. Capitalism and democracy had prevailed, while communism and autocracy had collapsed into itself. But wait a minute, that's not how Russia saw it.
Russia is not a defeated power. It never. Moscow refused to say that it was something like Germany or Japan in 1945. It wanted to be a co-creator of a post-Cold War order.
Russia wanted to proactively join the West, but not as a subordinate, not as a loser, but rather as a partner to rebuild an international system of cooperation based on, quote, the goals and principles in the UN Charter on equitable and partnership relations among states. In other words, they wanted to help build a system that was based off of international laws, where our differences are worked out through institutions instead of the old way, where the most powerful empires would build big military alliances and set the rules for everyone.
It was always a sense of we escape this Cold War together. There are no winners in a Cold War, only losers, but they're only winners in ending a Cold War.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with this statement so far. I mean, remember when Vladimir Putin had a conversation with Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson glazed him when he went on that, definitely not an agent, by the way, when he went on that trip to Russia? And aside from talking about how historically Ukraine is Russia and a number of different like idiotic things that Vladimir Putin stated, there was one part that I thought was really interesting and very revealing, which is when he openly was like, why can't we be your Israel? Like, we'll be your we are not, he literally is like, we're not socialists, which they're not, is true. He's like, come on, we're a kleptocracy. You guys are an oligarchy. Why can't we get along? I promise we'll do Israel shit with you. Like, look at the way we put down the Chechen uprisings. Like, please. And I think that there is a little bit of honesty there, that especially considering that Vladimir Putin himself is the hand-selected asset and the successor that was in line with American interests at the time. It makes sense that they would want to join the West.
Okay, so we're in the 1990s. Bill Clinton just came into the White House, defeating George H.W. Bush, and Washington, D.C. is descending into this debate on how they're going to treat Russia. Are they the losers of the Cold War who should be punished, or should we embrace them as partners to build a new world order together?
This is a
One
resurface
camp
video
of American thinkers argued that Russia had clearly lost the war. They don't deserve a full seat at the table, and in fact, should be treated with skepticism. The U.S. military must keep a big presence in Europe and even expand its influence, because Russia might become aggressive again. And if we do this, says this camp, it'll also have the effect of spreading democracy, which means more peace and stability.
Right from the beginning, Russia was treated very differently from Poland and other countries. Why on earth should we support Russia, our old enemy?
But then there was another side who had a different view, and they were made up of a lot of experts and diplomats, people who really understood the Soviet Union. They said that framing this in terms of winners and losers is maybe rational, but it's dangerous. That's what empires have always done when they come out on top. But it always breeds more war. Most recently, when the winners of World War I punished Germany by making them pay everyone back for the damage they caused, limiting their economy and military, making them sign a treaty admitting that it was all their fault. All of this leading to economic despair and national humiliation.
This isn't going to last. If you're going to impose this sort of thing, make Germany an outcast, then you're going to have just building up resentment. We end up with the Second World War and Adolf Hitler.
Let's not do that, said this camp. Instead, let's take advantage of this momentum towards peace, this appetite that Russia has to actually work together, and invite them in to be co-creators of a new global order, one that they influence and participate in. They warned that if we just expand our military alliance that was meant to oppose the former Soviet Union, all we're going to be doing is punishing Russia, isolating them, forcing them to become our enemy again. Let's not do that again, says this camp.
That was the crucial element, the plan to enlarge a military alliance system, which had been designed against the Soviet Union, now effectively against Russia. You're going to make it an enemy.
Enlarging NATO will erase the artificial line in Europe.
Why are you saying this video deserves to be deleted?
By Stalin at the end of World War II.
But by the mid-90s, Bill Clinton and the men and women he was surrounded with sided more and more with the expansionists camp. He did this for a couple reasons. First off, he was running for president for his second term in 1996, and he needed the Polish-American vote. And so one of the things that he would say at campaign rallies was, we're going to expand NATO to Poland, to rally Polish Americans to vote for him. But it wasn't just that. It was also because the administration was looking at Eastern Europe and seeing a lot of instability. This place was in chaos in the 90s. It was unstable, it was uncertain, made up of delicate new democracies that were all sitting in the shadow of America's old enemy. So let's lock them in as our allies so they don't descend back into Russia's orbit, says Bill Clinton and his people. But wait, hold on. Russia doesn't have an orbit right now. It's the mid-90s and Russia is in shambles. Their entire system just collapsed and their country is in chaos. Okay, but all these Clinton people were like Cold War people. They'd had deep mistrust towards Russia and the Soviet Union, and they didn't feel certain that Russia wasn't going to become aggressive again someday soon. They needed to lock in the countries of Eastern Europe to their military alliance, just in case. And this is when people on the other side of the debate really start to sound the alarm bells.
So many wise US leaders all said this was a mistake of historic proportions.
And they were very worried. Chief among them, this guy, George Kennan. Who is he and why is he a valid opinion?
He deleted his video because the narrative is straight up Russian propaganda. America didn't expand NATO. Eastern Europe begged or strong-armed to join to protect themselves from Russian imperialism and avoid getting genocided like the Circassians. And all these narratives remove the perspective of Eastern Europeans who were the main architects of NATO expansion and not the United States. Okay. While I believe, certainly, that Eastern European nations wanted to join NATO, you also still have to understand that it is America that gets to have a say. And I don't even agree with him when he says America was doing this for simple election because they wanted to fucking win elections, and that's why they expanded NATO into Poland. Or that these people were like genuinely maybe a little too concerned with Russia because of Cold War era resentment. Okay. Yeah. Why couldn't Bill Clinton have done the same with Irish Americans by saying we will give the provisional IRA cruise missiles? Yeah. There's a non-zero chance Johnny will DMCA clip channels reactions to this on YouTube. Yeah, don't clip this, chatters who operate fan channels. I just wanted to see this. They picked apart Russia for scraps, the USSR for scraps. They designed, they basically privatized all the state assets in the hands of a select few. They destroyed the entirety of the economy of the USSR. Did chatter just say Poland strong-armed the USA? Yes. That is a Baltic chatter. Don't get too mean. Don't be too upset. But yes. That is 100% a Baltic chatter. That's like a Estonian or a Latvian chatter that said the country of Poland strong-armed the United States of America and forced them into allowing Poland into NATO. Okay. Are you going on Timcast IRL tomorrow? No. Why would I go on Timcast IRL tomorrow?
In this moment in the 90s as a critic of NATO enlargement.
He was one of the most respected U.S. diplomats of our time.
Ambassador George Kennan. He is one of America's most admired analysts of foreign policy.
George Kennan was a U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union for a very long time. He understood this region better than maybe any other American. He was, quote, one of the great American statesmen of the 20th century. Kennan is 94 years old at this point, and he's freaking out about the idea that Bill Clinton wants to expand NATO into all of these former Soviet countries. Here he is writing a New York Times op-ed saying that expanding NATO would be the most fateful error of American foreign policy of the entire post-Cold War era, and that this expansion would make the founding fathers of this country turn over in their graves. What did he fear would happen if NATO expanded?
It would alienate Russia, and it would bring to power in Russia a government hostile to the West.
And he gets really specific. I mean, this guy really understands Russia. He says that expanding NATO would, quote, inflame the nationalistic, anti-Western, and militaristic tendencies in Russian opinion, to have an adverse effect on the development of Russian democracy. It would restore the atmosphere of the Cold War to East-West relations, and it would impel Russian foreign policy in directions decidedly not to our liking. I mean, let that sink in for a second. This is the mid-90s. This guy's predicting that if we expand NATO, it will inflame the nationalistic, anti-Western, and militaristic tendencies in Russian opinion. I mean, it kind of sounds like this guy has a crystal ball. But Clinton proceeds with this plan. The Soviet leader at the time is angry at this, saying that if NATO expands, he sees, quote, nothing but humiliation for Russia.
We'll have the result what happened with Germany in the interwar years. We have a unique opportunity, NATO. It needs an enemy. It needs an external. And if it doesn't have an enemy, it will generate one.
Now, quick thing here. George Kennan, the diplomat who is freaked out about the fact that NATO is expanding in the 90s, isn't saying this because he's like worried about Russia. He's saying this because he's like, this is going to come back to bite us. This is a bad idea. And look how bummed he is at the end of this article. Quote, this has been my life, and it pains me to see it screwed up in the end. George Kennan lived to be 101 years old, passing away a year after his predictions really started coming true. NATO expanded right up to Russia's border, a military alliance created to deter Russia, aimed right at Russia. The chance to find a real peace was slipping away. Back in Washington, the Washington Post columnist David Ignatius was watching this all happen and lamented, quote, "What makes the Russia case so sad is that the Clinton administration may have squandered one of the most precious assets imaginable, which is the idealism and goodwill of the Russian people as they emerged from 70 years of communist rule. The Russian debacle may haunt us for generations, and haunt us it has." Okay, but hold on. Let's just check in really quick, because I know some of you were like, whoa, what is this guy saying? Let me make a few points very clear. The US deciding to shape the decisions in post-Cold War Europe so that NATO would expand was the rational thing to do. Any rational big country looking out for its self-interest would probably do the same. This is how powerful countries are expected.
Wait, I don't understand. He spent the first 12 minutes talking about like potentially having reconstruction efforts after the dissolution of the USSR would have been more beneficial for their interests, only to turn around and be like, no, but it was in our self-interest. It was in our best interest. I mean, there's two ways of going about it. And yes, increased militancy and a protection racket in the form of NATO that offers steady defense contractors a job over and over again, and having like a united enemy is one way to go about it. But I happen to believe that is the remaining industry that we have in this country. Talking about realism now, you were right. He's literally read a Mearsheimer book. I don't think so. I think he read the book that he's talking about.
Skeptical of their former enemy, who they just fought the last 50 years of tense proxy war with. They had a right to do this, and the countries who joined NATO had a right to do it too, and they joined for their own desires, their own free will. No one forced them. What I'm trying to say here is that while they did make a rational strategic decision, what they could have done in this really opportune window of potential peace is make the perhaps less rational self-serving decision to say, you know what, Russia, old enemy of ours, we don't really trust you, but we see that you are earnest in trying to build a positive peace in Europe and around the world. We see that you have national pride and that you're not going to be subservient to the United States in building that peace. And so come to the table and let's work on this together. Let's roll up our sleeves and do whatever it takes to make sure that we don't end up in another global conflict, because those are really bad. American leaders could have done this in the 90s. And in fact, we already kind of had a great blueprint on where to start.
If we had had this charter a few years ago, and above all, the will to use it, millions now dead would be alive.
After the world almost completely ripped itself apart in the Second World War, we all came together and built a new world order that would ensure that this wouldn't happen again. Peace, the world decided, would only be achieved if we embraced our former enemies and then created a set of laws and agreements, treaties and charters that would set up some common rules for everyone. Governments could run their countries as they...
I feel like this also still loops back around to American imperialism, where it's like, we could have Marshall planned the former USSR nation states, including Russia. And then that way we could have used them better against like other enemies down the line, like China, which is the Vivek Ramaswamy take. Just, you know, a couple decades too late. Like, it's literally like, why don't we bring Russia into NATO as well? Marshall plan them. Instead of shock therapy, Marshall plan them. And then now they're an ally. Now they're an asset. And then now we even more powerful force. Permanent American dominance.
Pleased, but when doing stuff on the international stage, they had to obey the rules. The most powerful countries would get some special leadership privileges, but even they had to still obey the rules, which was a big change from the old days, where big powerful empires set the rules in their region and no one could tell them otherwise. And guess what? In the aftermath of World War II, we kind of did it. We set up this system and we all agreed to it. This system started with the United Nations, but soon grew into something much bigger, much more powerful.
The United Nations is just a centerpiece of a larger international system. And on its basis, we have the UN Charter in 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
The United States, being the most powerful country, took a natural leadership role in this system, ensuring that countries would abide by the new rules.
The United States, I respect its leadership as the most powerful state after the Second World War. It's most appropriate that it should take a lead in all sorts of international affairs. However, it should do that within the framework of this sovereign internationalism.
Okay, but this system kind of struggled to fully get off the ground because almost immediately the United States and Soviet Union became locked in this power struggle that is the Cold War.
Yeah, one could almost make the assertion that, yeah, they had their eyes on the prize, and very quickly after World War II, they were like, well, the real enemy is right there. I think it's time to rebuild Europe in our own vision, and, take out some of these pesky USSR sympathizers from leadership positions, even though they were quite literally the only popular forces, for understandable reasons, after World War II, considering that they were the anti-Nazi forces in the country. And lo and behold, who is the best anti-communist force in the country? Oh, that's right. The fucking Nazis and fascist sympathizers that weren't killed or imprisoned. And maybe that was the vision.
Sides broke a lot of the international rules in the name of trying to one-up each other. But that's why this moment in the 90s is so vital. It was such a precious moment because the Cold War was over. The world had a blueprint for a real rules-based global system based on charters and treaties and rules and laws. And it looked like we no longer would need big military alliances like NATO and the Warsaw Pact. But, and this is perhaps the most important point of this video, in order for the US to actually usher in this era of peace based on laws and rules,
it's kind of crazy that they got mad at him for this video exclusively because he talks about this from the perspective of like what he perceives as the USSR opinion or what he perceives as the Russia opinion, because there's still a shit ton in here, like attributing NATO expansion to simply Bill Clinton wanting to win the Polish vote, or people just having like a lot of fear, Cold War era resentments in Clinton's administration. And then even in this circumstance where he's talking about like, the rule-based international order, which is, in my opinion, designed not to create like a sense of law and order and create, global prosperity, global trade, partnerships, in order to eventually have all security cooperation perish because there's no need for it. No, it was a way for America to become the hegemonic power. And we see that right now in the same week or month that Johnny Harris wrote this video and published it better than ever. Look at Israel. Look at America. But especially look at America's ally, Israel, and the way that it operates and the indifference that America has, and not even the indifference, as a matter of fact, the anger and resentment that Americans feel towards, like American politicians feel towards our international organs of justice that are supposed to uphold American hegemony. But in instances where it's like glaringly obvious, the hypocrisy and the violence is in full display, and these institutions that want to maintain some semblance of respect and credibility, all of a sudden have to openly contend with America's partnership with Israel and the actions that America's partner is engaging in. And America very openly is like, no, you don't do that. These are organs of justice that work for us. They're not supposed to work against us. International rule-based order means we make the rules and you follow the orders. So it's interesting. So there is still a lot of like liberal idealism, I think, in his analysis.
Looked like we no longer would need big military alliances like NATO and the Warsaw Pact. But, and this is perhaps the most important point of this video, in order for the US to actually usher in this era of peace based on laws and rules, it would have to abide by the rules. Even though it was the most powerful country, it would actually have to obey the laws, just like everyone else.
Don't you think it's more nuanced than this? It's not that every U.S. action was in favor of an equal world order, but it's also not like every U.S. action was aimed at total domination either. No, I think most U.S. actions, most government actions are aimed at total domination. Why wouldn't it be? Yeah, no, I think you can say that that's unnuanced and that's fine, but I think most of it is directly at the behest of profits for key sectors, key corporations, key corporate interests. But it's pure self-interest. I think that's assigning a Cold Warrior attitude to a pre-Cold War world. We're talking post-Cold War. I think that in the immediate aftermath of the Cold War, American powers saw that there was an opportunity to dominate. They were not harmed in the same exact way. Because the realpolitik analysis of the existence of NATO was projecting U.S. power, not fighting communism. That's why they wanted Russia to bend the knee or keep being their enemy, right? I guess my perspective on it is that there were two superpowers that were aligned during World War II, and they were tasked with picking apart the spoils as the victors of World War II. And in that process, I think America not being hindered in the same way that Russia did. Now, America never got the same penalties that Russia did. They weren't directly invaded. They didn't have tens of millions of people killed. And they also had collectivization occur over 400 years of chattel slavery, industrialization. They were in a dramatically different position in their evolution, in their productive forces, as opposed to the USSR. So all of that created a fantastic opportunity for America to dominate the other party during World War II that was ideologically directly opposed to America, who even in the FDR era was at most moving towards social democracy, but never fully subscribing to any sort of serious anti-capitalist movement. They were always very resentful towards that sort of thing, and ultimately they took advantage of that opportunity. They rebuilt Western Europe in their own vision. They utilized that rebuilding process and NATO as a way to secure not only secure military contracts, not only secure a permanent partnership, but also it was a very bloody affair to begin with. Just like I mentioned, they directly put, even in Western Germany, for example, they directly put Nazi generals in positions of power to lead NATO. They directly propped up fascist movements in Italy. They engaged in acts of terror in an effort to cause instability and then allow these fascist movements to come back into positions of power. The idea that every country was, especially even in Western Europe, every country was super on board with NATO in its inception is completely wrong. As a matter of fact, France comes to mind immediately in its history, where a lot of the European allies saw NATO as putting crosshairs on them unnecessarily. They looked at the USSR and they were like, but they're right there. They were incredibly important in the liberation of Europe. Why the fuck would we want to see them as enemies? There were liberal capitalists in these countries as well. They certainly also saw USSR as a threat to their profits, to their current existing hierarchy that they wanted to maintain. But ultimately, most of the public was not as diametrically opposed to the USSR as people are now. So we basically forced a lot of countries' hands into joining NATO.
invading countries without the permission of the group, no giving special privileges to countries you like, no intervening in other countries' affairs to make them look more like you. Like any other legal system, no one could be above the law, or it undermines the legitimacy for everyone.
After the end of the Cold War, we needed to establish a pan-continental European system. This should definitely not have been anti-American, but it should have been post-American. America then could go on to focus on its own development, its own infrastructure, its own people.
But when you're the global superpower, unambiguously more powerful than every other country, it's really hard to give up a portion of that power to play by the rules like everybody else. So, as we've seen, the US didn't surrender to this new system. They didn't let Russia co-design it with them. Instead, they kept a lot of their troops on the European continent and around the world. And
Polish guy here, gotta say, nobody forces to join NATO. I'm not talking about Eastern Europe. I'm talking about Western Europe.
Expanded their military alliance. And it's not like the US just gave up on an international rules.
We're talking about during the Cold War, the inception of NATO, the origins of NATO, and why it originally existed.
Based order. They continued to promote an international system, but instead of a true rules-based other country, it's really hard to give up a portion of that power to play by the rules like everybody else. So, as we've seen, the US didn't surrender to this new system. They didn't let Russia co-design it with them. Instead, they kept a lot of their troops on the European continent and around the world and expanded their military alliance. And it's not like the US just gave up.
Not to be weird, but the system that's being proposed sounds like it would further entrench capital just with less overt violence. Yes. No, absolutely. No, that is the argument. The counter argument here isn't that like NATO should not have existed in its inception, and that the counter argument here is that the USSR was truly an evil empire that must be fought back against every step of the way. But having said that, once the USSR was destroyed, they should have brought Russia into the sphere of American influence by doing a similar like Marshall Plan.
On an international rules-based order. They continued to promote an international system, but instead of a true rules-based international order, the United States started to enforce an order where everyone else had to follow the rules, except for them. They would become the global enforcer of the rules. They were above the law that they helped create. And we felt justified in doing this because we had the most powerful military that was everywhere, all the time, all at once, enforcing the rules and ensuring stability in the global economy. And many Americans thought, we kind of have the best governmental system. And there's nothing wrong with breaking some of the rules to spread that system around the world.
Wait, what? This cooks. I mean, I don't know why. This is cooking. And I have my disagreements, but I don't know why he deleted this.
After all, if all the countries adopt this system, there'll be more peace in the world. World.
This is the view that we have the answers to history. Our societies are obviously demonstrably best. This messianic vision that we need to shape the world, educate the world, and if the world doesn't like it, we bash them over the head and use force.
JD Panjani came out. JD Panjani said permanent first world genocide. What the fuck? People called him a Russian asset. Sometimes you make content so good you have to delete it. Yeah, what the fuck?
Make them see the light.
Okay, I'm being a little bit cheeky about the United States' dominance over the global order and the hypocrisy built into that. But the fact is, the U.S. being the global leader has led to an era of unprecedented peace and stability. The U.S. protects the global economy.
For who? Bro, this is why I get so mad at people who always say nothing ever happens. Yeah, bitch, to you. You live in Naperville. Like, yeah, of course nothing ever happens to you, dumbass. Okay? Motherfuckers will always be like, nothing ever happens. Nothing will ever happen. Yeah, nothing happens to you. We are sheltered from the violence of our actions. Okay? Like, I get it. I know. It's like saying that there is an unprecedented era. This led to an unprecedented era devoid of conflict is so crazy because all you're doing in this time frame is, I guess, sheltering those in the heart of empire from the direct violence and instability that you are causing in an effort to set up a permanent unequal exchange process with the global south. There's always things happening. There's always things happening. Things never cease to happen. Okay? Things are always happening. It's just not happening to you. That's what that means.
Economy, it ensures our financial system. It mediates peace deals and diplomacy. It responds to natural disasters. It sends peacekeeping forces and does indeed enforce many of the rules of our global system. But my point here is that in doing so, it has also imbued itself with a status of being above those rules, able to break the rules.
Yeah, even Fukuyama was like, things are happening, my bad. Are happening at an alarming rate all the time. Okay? I was wrong as fuck.
Rules when it sees fit.
This has led to double standards, and it's led to states like Russia, China, Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, the list is quite long, who say no. We don't want this.
I mean, you know this feeling, right? It's like when the cop or the rich guy breaks the rules and they think they're above the law. It's the most infuriating thing. It violates our most basic sense of justice. And that's kind of what's happened around the world.
I'm the last to be an anti-American, but I am anti-American when it becomes this aggressive, irresponsible, lawless statement.
Real peace only comes when there is a system that everyone abides by. And if you don't do that, you end up with a system that produces a couple countries that are above the law and then a bunch of other countries that are angry because they see this as unfair. And they start to work to undermine the entire system, to change it, which is exactly what happens next. So, as predicted, NATO expands. And as predicted, Russia feels punished, isolated, and left out. Which, as predicted back in the 90s, this humiliation and isolation gives rise to politicians who rise to power by criticizing the West and promising to restore Russia's greatness in light of the great humiliation from the West. Vladimir Putin came to power right after NATO started to enlarge. And at the beginning, he said he wanted to join NATO. Started to become more and more angry at the West. And Putin started to play to that anger. Or, in the words of crystal ball George Kennan back in the 90s, the expansion of NATO inflamed the nationalistic, anti-Western, and militaristic tendencies in Russian opinion. You can see this. Putin becomes more and more of a nationalistic zealot, rallying the pride of Russian greatness, calling for the restoration of Russian.
Yeah, I'm pro-Russia because they're fighting against woke. That's why. This is when will he start talking about how Russia is fighting against the woke? That's the most important aspect of this for me. I mean, I don't think that this is incorrect. You don't have to agree with Russia to recognize. You don't have to agree with Russia or its actions, specifically in Ukraine or in general, in its own internal affairs, to understand why politicians outside of the orbit of American influence, outside of the sphere of American influence, would see it as beneficial to consistently ham up anti-American statements, anti-Western statements. You know, I will watch his apologies after this.
Behavior, denouncing the West for trying to weaken his great empire. Meanwhile, over here in the West, we feel totally validated for our decision to expand NATO.
But by joining NATO and by expanding NATO, you create precisely the enemy that the point of joining NATO was designed to avert. So it became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
See? We told you so. We're so glad we listened to the expansionists, because look at Russia. They are just unhinged. And what's the solution? Continue expanding NATO. So in 2008, NATO promises Ukraine and Georgia would eventually become members. And this, to me, is where the window of peace closes. This is weird. I was just in Georgia, the country, talking to young people who want to join the West, want to join the EU and NATO, because Russia is so aggressive. And what's so ironic is that their plight is absolutely real. Modern Russia is a horrible place to be in the shadow of. And yet what is also true is that NATO expansion helped create that version of Russia. And this is what's so horrible about this kind of conflict. You start to get into a spiral of hostility where both sides feel justified in their position. They feel so justified that they act aggressively.
I think it's really interesting. I think this is a really interesting take. I mean, he's not agreeing with Russia or its actions. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I don't know why it's completely inappropriate to even say that, like, people that we have designed as our enemies still have like a logical through line in why they operate the ways that they do. This is the first base radical centrist two sides take. Yeah. It's kind of funny because I would go so far as to say he would probably write this video maybe 5 to 10 years later, judging by his track record on like former American interventions and the way he talks about former American interventions. This is a video for like 5 years, 10 years. Like you can't, if you're Johnny Harris, you can't write the video right now as like Russia is still doing Russia shit. You know what I mean? If he wrote this video 5 to 10 years later, all the liberals would be like, damn, that's a banger, dude. You really are fantastic in your analysis. Like, but he wrote it too soon. That's the problem. Because it's not, I don't think this is like pro-Russia, the way that people are saying this is pro-Russia. I agree with it, but he pretends Putin didn't design the nationalist politics. No, I think he recognizes that. I think he recognizes that. He's just simply saying that. I guess it's his liberal assessment across the board. Just like I don't think Bill Clinton personally brought Poland into NATO because he wanted to win the Polish voting bloc. And I also personally don't think that Vladimir Putin was like, oh, I guess I'm going to be anti-West now because the West has fucked me over. Like, no, countries have interest in maintaining their sovereignty. They have material interests. I'm sure that Vladimir Putin being our guy originally meant that, yeah, he probably recognized that he could either be in the sphere of Western influence, which would have given him and his cronies a lot more opportunity to dominate Russian existence in the exact way that they do now, but with without any sort of Western pushback whatsoever. Okay. And they could have been a wonderful, loyal servant of American empire. But that doesn't mean that he's not like inherently nationalistic or inherently self-interested. Reading the comments, it was really telling because a lot of the comments were just how Russia is inherently aggressive and that's the nature of the nation, just a total lack of real analysis and no analysis is allowed, so they get mad at anything that sounds like justification. Yeah, but that is common with our analysis on any sort of American enemy. Any country or non-state actor that is created as a villain in American society in an effort to justify American military action creates that exact same resentment towards those who go, wait a minute, I want to see like a different perspective here. Like, why is Russia behaving this way? That's it. I mean, think about it. Think about how much people fucking go crazy over my analysis. Not even justification, but my analysis over how like these non-state actors that are consistently resisting against American imperialism, both throughout history and certainly currently against Israel, like how they are viewed and how people view my commentary on the matter. The reason why they view it as like the reason why they view what I do to be inherently hostile is because like they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that these people have like their own personal autonomy. It's much better if you consider them to be ontologically evil and you can do anything and everything you want to destroy them because you must destroy them because they threaten American hegemony.
Aggressively towards the other side. And those actions then communicate to the other side that they are justified in their hostile feelings and they're justified in acting aggressive towards you. And back and forth, both sides continue down the spiral towards greater and greater conflict until people eventually start to die.
Russia overnight launched its long-anticipated attack on Ukraine.
NATO is set to put a force...
Like, this still doesn't take agency away from Russia. I think I have a very similar perspective to this as well. Russia has its own industry, its own defense manufacturing. Russia has its own energy interests. Russia has its own interest in land grabs. It can be multifaceted. It can be pushing back against NATO incursion that threatens its border and its territorial sovereignty, but it also simultaneously isn't bad to just steal some fucking land. You know what I mean? Steal some nice Ukrainian land in the process. And no matter how violent you are in the process, it's still justifiable in the eyes of the Russians. It's not, though. It's still an unjustifiable act. But it's important to understand why. It's still important to understand why they think it's justifiable, because they're not operating on like comic book villain principles. They're not like, yes, I would like to be violent and bad for the pure purpose of being violent and bad.
Of 300,000 on high alert.
The U.S. and its G7 allies are moving forward with a
Russia was an evil imperialist nation longer than the U.S. ever existed before it became one too. Yeah, I mean, it was an empire. So they've had a lot longer process in maintaining forcible control over these lands. So, you know, Russian people are evil though. Anti-LGBT wife beaters. Okay, come on, dude. The wives that are being beaten are still Russian in that situation. The LGBT people that are being brutalized are still Russian in that equation. This is something that people don't understand, where it's like, we just think of them like as an evil monolith. It's the same principle behind like, oh, well, Hamas is throwing gay people off roofs. First of all, they're not doing that. That's ISIS. But secondly, even if they were doing that, who the fuck do you think they're throwing off the roofs? They're gay Palestinians. Like, it's not a monolith.
$50 billion loan package to help Ukraine fight Russia.
The point of NATO today is to deal with the outcome of its own existence.
So, is Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine justified? No, absolutely not. As I was reporting and writing on this, I was thinking of the people in Ukraine. I talk to some of them every once in a while. And if I were one of them, I would feel angry and sensitive to any version of this kind of thinking, anything that would give a shred of justification for the horrific war that Vladimir Putin has decided to enact to rip this country apart. So let me be crystal clear. Vladimir Putin started a war of choice and sold it to his people through lies and grand delusion.
I mean, we do that too, by the way. I mean, that's why I always used to say, like, I criticize Putin for doing America shit. And whenever I used to bring this up, people get so mad at me because there's still this like underlying America kind of good attitude that a lot of people have. When I compare what Vladimir Putin was doing to America, I was saying it's the most evil thing you can do, which is so funny when people just like literally thought I was justifying their actions. It's like, no, I don't justify America's actions either. That's it. Lying and being like, oh yeah, we're denazifying Ukraine. Okay, dude, sure. Like claiming that there is an ancient claim to the lands that you are overtaking in Ukraine. It's like, you know, it's America shit.
Rhetoric, and has gone on to bomb civilians and rip apart a country that was pursuing its own right within its region. It is a travesty and a moral failing, and it should be condemned. And yet that full-throated condemnation should not make us blind to the backstory that explains how we got here.
There's a difference between explaining a war and justifying it. What I'm doing is explaining the position and trying to get as much accuracy in the technical detail.
Just a note on the psychology of all of this. I find myself in this situation a lot. I explore borders and the history of borders a lot in my work, especially when I go to the actual place where a line on a map causes tension and conflict. I always feel a sense of two kinds of blame. The first kind is the easy one. It's who's to immediately blame for the conflict at the time. It's usually some leader who decided to invade, some regime that has decided to occupy. And yet when you look into it, there's always a deeper blame to be levied. In most of the places I go, that blame is historical. It's to be applied to the great powers that drew those lines in the first place, that created those identities that are now fighting each other. In the case of a lot of borders I go to, it's the British. And it's become this kind of meme in the...
Okay, to be fair, it's almost always... What's the age-old saying? It's like, if you want to blame a country, if you want to blame one country for everything, you can blame England first, like the British first, and then America second. Fuck it, you could blame America on the English too. It's always the British.
Comments whenever I go to a former British colony that this conflict looks like a civil war between two groups, but really it's the British that's to blame, even if the blame today is easier to be put on some greedy warlord. That's a weird thing to parse through, but I get that same feeling in this case. This history doesn't justify Putin's invasion, but it does force us to ponder how we could have taken another path, a path that would have prevented us.
Most common holiday in the world is Independence Day from the British. Oh my God, that's true.
From ending up in this outcome. And to me, what this story clearly tells us is that in the future, when we're thinking about peace, we have to remember that peace will never come unless the big, powerful country puts down its sword and agrees to play by the rules that everyone else has to play by. No system of order and rule.
Yeah, I mean, listen, after my Oxford and Cambridge Union speech, I know why they did it, okay? You can't stay on that fucking island, dude. Sun setting at 3 p.m., rainy all the goddamn time. I get it. I fucking get it, dude. I understand the epigenetic need for the British to leave that godforsaken island and go to a tropical destination where they got spices and shit for at least a little bit, okay? For at least a little bit of a period of time.
Rules and laws can work unless everyone is subject to those laws. And if we're going to eradicate the curse of war, which is so natural to humans, it's only going to be by something totally strange and irrational, like the most powerful country deciding to give up some of its power and commit to a system of enlightened conflict through war.
But that's great. So, I mean, it's very Libby, but like ultimately the counter to this is no, if America does that, then the power vacuum that is created will allow the big, bad, scary USSR to dominate the world. And that will be far too terrifying because those guys are, they're scary. And that was the justification during the Cold War. And now the current justification in the, second Cold War is if America if America is no longer the global hegemonic power, it will be China. And we don't know what those guys are up to. I don't understand their language, okay? They're always up to some tricks. That's the attitude that people have. So that is what I think causes a lot of people in the Western world to, even when they exhaust the logic of it all, the logic of American hegemony, this is the final conclusion that they arrive at. And not only is this an Orientalist perspective, but also on top of that, there's an air of uncertainty that human beings are naturally terrified of. And that sense of uncertainty and that sense of fear that they don't want to know what it would look like if America wasn't the dominant power is the reason why so many people end up saying, America does a lot of wrong, but at the end of the day, they're trying their best. And I think the alternative is far too scary.
Words and institutions and laws and justice. A system that doesn't rely on who has the biggest military, who has the biggest alliance, who can make the most weapons the fastest. I believe that humanity will eventually get there. But for now, it looks like we're back on the spiral of conflict that usually only goes one direction. But my hope is that we can look back and learn from our mistakes.
I actually have a great belief that the United States periodically...
Yeah, I get why people are a bit mad at this video, bro. Come on. He's saying that, America fucked up by not dominating Russia in the same way that it did Western Europe in the aftermath of the Cold War and brought Russia into the Western sphere of influence, which is ironic because, it's still very much pro-American, pro-capitalist domination around the globe. But ultimately it would still, it would lead to less violent outcomes is what the argument is. It's not necessarily critically examining the Cold War at all. It's just taking for granted that America is still on the right side of history, but they fucked up by not bringing Russia into America's sphere of influence.
It does have the capacity to renew itself, an amazing capacity to provide that leadership that we want to see from the United States, which is enlightened leadership for peace and development of the sort talked about by Eisenhower and Kennedy. We want a better West to emerge out of this.
Okay, so here's his apology.
Hey, everyone. I am taking down the video that I published earlier this week on NATO and Russia. I want to redo it. I got some things wrong, and I want to do it right. I am so...
Oh, my God. He's going to come out even stronger. He's going to be like, God damn America. God damn America, the scourge of empire. He read Lenin, dude. He's going to come in hot. He's going to be like, imperialism is the final stage of capitalism. It necessitates empire. You have to have it. You have to constantly find new markets to dominate, to extract natural resources from the global south through violent means. That's why he's like, I took down the video because God damn it, I'm a Marxist Leninist.
Grateful for the wave of feedback that I got from this. The comment section can be a brutal place sometimes, and this was hard for me at first, but ultimately I love this.
This is just like when he said that comparing Lebanon to the West Bank was out of pocket. Yeah, I know. That was so funny because he literally made the right comparison, and everyone in his comment section was like, what are you talking about? Of course, comparing settlers and their desires in settling in southern Lebanon is identical to the West Bank. And they're not some random extremists. They are random extremists at the end of the day. But how do you think the West Bank was expanded into? How do you think the West Bank was settled in? It's always random settlers that just kind of dip their toes in the water and then get state protection. That's how it works. So he made the correct take on that. And then he had to delete it and apologize for it. And I think this is not even an aggressive stance at all. I don't even disagree with this video. It's kind of shocking that I guess the only part of it, I'm thinking what people could be mad at. And I guess it's the Eastern Europeans being like, no, we wanted to be a part of NATO, which is sure valid. Okay. I guess that's the only thing. It's like, oh, you're taking our you're taking our autonomy out of the equation. I assume that's probably it, right? But this is not about Eastern European countries. This is more so about Russia's own attitude. Estonia's rating his comment section. Yeah, that's what happens when you have a country that has fucking broadband and better ISPs overall, 55% women. Okay, it's a paradise, and they fucking vote by internet. That's what happens. They got too much time online.
I love that I can put something out there and that I can hear from you, a group of people who come back with good faith debunks, critiques, and feedback for me to make me better at what I do, to wake me up to blind spots I might have in my perspective. I deeply appreciate it.
It's kind of crazy because that's the first time he actually critically examined a blind spot, in my opinion, where he didn't he approached the subject matter from the perspective of the enemies. Like, literally, that's one of the first instances where I've seen Johnny Harris do that. And I think it's a healthy practice, even if you don't agree with him. I don't fucking agree with Russia's actions in Ukraine, but I think it's still important to understand where they are coming from. Okay? Straight up.
That.
And the other side of it, like, I don't agree with Israel at all, but I still understand. And there's an endless amount of pro-Israeli opinions that you can encounter even if you don't want to on a regular basis, especially in mainstream institutions and in legacy publishers. But it's still important to understand where the fuck they're coming from. You know what I mean? I think it's a very important aspect of conflict resolution, is understanding the motivations rather than just casting aside everyone as like ontologically evil and worthy of death and destruction. So, I don't know. I spend a great deal of time trying to understand America's interests as well. Like, where they're coming from. Living in the United States of America, it's a lot easier. Yeah, just remember the last time he deleted a video when he said Gaza was not a genocide because it would diminish the term? That was another video. You're right. That's another video that he deleted.
And I believe that is the core of good journalism, being earnest about...
Isn't the Russian motive for invasion the false pretense that there's a genocide against Russia by Ukraine? No, that's one of the many different motives. And it's denazification, it's NATO incursion. Those are some of the reasons. But I think the reality is it's none of those reasons, okay? Those are simply justifications that a state applies in the same way that America was like, we have to go and invade Iraq because they did 9/11. They didn't do 9/11. We're just fucking lying, okay? It's just pretext. You need pretext. You can't just be like, we're going to invade this country. You have to lie to your population and tell them exactly why. You have to get them geared up. You have to get them ready to go, okay? That's it.
Seeking truth and knowing when you need to shift your perspective. So in this video, I'm just going to quickly get you up to speed on what I've learned, what I think I got wrong here, and also try to explain the intent behind publishing this video in the first place, because I kind of want your help on how to think about how to do a format like this. So first, what I got wrong here. It was clear to me.
Except there are actual Nazis in Ukraine. Brother, we live in the United States of America, okay? Do you know what the Atomwaffen is? We got hella Nazis in our fucking military too. And so does the Russian military. That is a saying that like a country has Nazis in their ranks and then using that as a justification to invade them is so stupid. Yeah, it was a fantastic move by Vladimir Putin. Really, really excellent job. What did he do in the process? Hundreds of thousands of people are casualties, okay, either permanently wounded or fucking dead, on both sides, destroyed everything, destroyed basically everything up to the entirety of Eastern Ukraine, mined it into oblivion, okay? And in order to make this incursion, he lost a shit ton of support, global destabilization. Overall, NATO is stronger than ever before, okay? It was a gift wrap. It was basically a gift basket a fruit basket to every NATO general. Look at fucking Syria. Like, and on top of that, at the end of the day, now that Ukraine is picked apart for scraps by Western capitalists, like, the next guy is not going to be Zelensky. The next guy that comes into power is going to be one of the Nazis, okay? Because when you invade a country, you literally make the most right-wing, the most reactionary, the most violent forces the heroes. You make them emancipatory heroes, okay? Every country that has been invaded has inevitably become more nationalist as a consequence of that. And it's understandable that they feel that way. Of course. It's so stupid. There will be no next guy. You're fantasizing if you think that there's, either you think Zelensky's going to live forever, or you think Russia is going to completely take over Ukraine, which is an insane statement. Like, what are they going to do with the fucking North Koreans? Like, how are they going to take over the entirety of the Ukraine? Anyway,
from a lot of these comments, mostly from Eastern Europeans, that I omitted the valuable perspective from these Eastern European countries that were a huge part of this story. This piece should have more thoroughly included those perspectives. I focused a lot on the geopolitics of the United States and Russia in the 90s when NATO was expanding. And in doing so, I think I left out a very valuable perspective. I see that very clearly now. I also didn't show a sensitivity to what it means to live next to modern Russia, an expansionist, hostile state that is currently fighting a war of choice with its neighbor. Not to mention the generational trauma that comes with the decades of atrocities under Soviet rule. I have no good excuse for leaving this stuff out other than a simple lack of sensitivity and understanding around those specific topics. That's something I genuinely want to change, and I am genuinely sorry for treating such sensitive topics without the care that I think they deserve.
What?
This feedback was also heard by our sponsor. They have their own experience with Russia and NATO, and they didn't want to be associated with this.
Oh my God, they pulled his sponsorship down? Yo, NATO Andes are crazy, dude. They fucking rang up the manager. They made a boss call, unless he means the CIA. That's crazy.
Now, I should be clear, sponsors have no editorial influence on what we cover or how we cover it. But them responding to your pushback is just another way that your voice is heard in all of this. So now let me explain why I made a video like this in the first place. I originally imagined this as the first of two videos.
It depends on how long this war drags on for. Ukrainian front lines are collapsing right now. Ukraine has a manpower shortage, but the Russian economy is not looking good. Either Russian economy collapses or Ukraine manpower collapses. A race to see which happens first. I mean, yeah. And I think manpower is more important. That's it.
Videos in a debate series where I take one piece of history and I treat it through two totally different perspectives. The first being NATO expansion as a missed opportunity for peace in the 90s. And the second being NATO expansion as the key for peace in the 90s for Eastern European states and for the world. This is a debate that academics and international relations scholars have. And when I was in grad school studying peace and conflict resolution, I had these kinds of debates. And I found them very valuable for learning. Even when I was engaging with stuff I didn't agree with, I found it useful. This is a type of conversation that we don't really have in news media today. It threatens to push us further into our ideological bunkers till eventually we can't even see the humanity of the people we disagree with. I want this channel and New Press as a whole to be a place where we can have the...
Didn't he get literally sponsored by the World Economic Forum to talk about like new capitalism, stakeholder capitalism, not shareholder capitalism? Like, bro, I think your sponsors do feel like they do sometimes have a little bit of editorial control. You know what I'm saying? Like I mean, come on. Maybe a little bit. A little bit.
These kinds of debates where we can talk about these kinds of narratives, and to do so independent of any corporate or ideological influence. So in addition to leaving out some of these valuable perspectives of Eastern European countries, I think I also did a poor job of communicating my intent and setting up this kind of debate format more clearly. So I still want to publish this video, but I just want to do it right. So my response to this is...
Bro, if you did a video like this, but for China, I think they would make the boss call. They would try to kill him, I think.
More, please. Like, even though this is uncomfortable for me, ultimately this is what I love about doing journalism on YouTube, where I get to directly publish to you, and then you get to give feedback to me, which makes my journalism better. So thank you to all of those who took time to give me feedback on this video and to point out where I missed the mark. Leave comments here in the description.
I still, to this day, think his worst video was the Joe Rogan Glaze sesh. To this day. I have my disagreements with his approach to American foreign policy. I've had a lot of disagreements with, key information that he omits, I think, from his commentary. And there is not a worse video than his Joe Rogan Glaze video. Like, that was the worst one. At least he admitted he was wrong. He didn't have to admit he was wrong in this video. I don't think he did anything that was wrong. I saw the knowing better criticisms. Here it is. Okay. Which, what happened? I guess he like blocked and unblocked me or something. I thought I used to follow him and he used to follow me back. Wow, finally getting around to the Johnny Harris video. This is shred of propaganda. NATO didn't invade these countries or force them to join. They practically begged to join, Baltic states especially. That's not the point of the video. Isn't this the kind of crap you kids have been consuming? No, he might have blocked and unblocked, so I don't follow him anymore and he doesn't follow me. This is what Johnny Harris thinks those Baltic states should have done. They should have made the perhaps less self-serving decision and just sing kumbaya to their historically aggressive former enemy. What an insane take. Yeah, Russia had so much territorial and imperial irredentist ambitions in the aftermath of the dissolution of the USSR. They'd have nothing. Oh, you can remove followers? Anyway, his primary interviews are Russian stooge who writes biased books about Ukraine. He also thinks Trump didn't collude with Russia in 2016. 2021 book Deception argues investigations of Russiagate allegations Donald Trump concluded with Russia to win were politically biased and based on unverified documents. He said the investigations polarized the U.S. and politicized the intelligence community, which greatly damaged the country and soured U.S.-Russia relations. Okay, open democracy, pro-Russian bias, and lack of expertise on Ukraine. Described him as a pro-Putin scholar. Dude, people are so crazy. They're just like, they get so mad. I don't know, man. The coup video is pretty awful. Which one? Seeing Russian propaganda aimed towards American women has me feeling like we're screwed. Oh, the coup video, the CIA coups. Yeah. That one was bad. Harris keeps doing the exact same thing Tim Pool does. Scream the crazy part, whisper the sane part. First of all, Tim Pool does not ever whisper the sane part. That's insane. The U.S. dominated and never followed global rules, which has led to unprecedented peace and stability. Guess which one people will remember at the end of the video? What are you meaning? What are you saying? Why did you fucking rip this format of the actual... What? He didn't yell one part and then say the other part quietly. He just said it with the same... What? At this point, it's not even a criticism. You're just like writing one in all caps and then the other with no caps. Again, what an absolutely insane take. They wanted to join Russia because NATO because Russia is aggressive, but Russia is aggressive because they want to join NATO. Honestly, sounds like Georgia should join NATO. And this is the line that everyone is pointing to that says, to saying he's being fair. He condemns Putin's invasion of Ukraine. After 20 minutes of justifying why Putin invaded Ukraine, though he prefers to call it explaining, I think Johnny Harris is not pro-Russia invading Ukraine. Brave take. Okay? I know. I think it's wild. I think people should be more... I think people should be more embarrassed to have such anti-intellectual ways of thinking, especially YouTube commentators who value their critical thinking skills and hail it as like one of their biggest their biggest strong suits. Like, it's just crazy. It's so weird. Critical support to Johnny Harris. I might not agree on much, but I think it's not a bad... I don't think it's a bad thing to try to understand where your enemies are coming from. And anyone that says that that is wrong and incorrect, and that you must assume that your enemies are ontologically evil, there's no logic to their ways of thinking, do not want to solve these problems. Okay? They do not want to solve these problems. It is anti-intellectual ways of thinking that I see far too many liberals comfortable with, especially in the past couple of years. It is very, very interesting to see because liberals consistently hail themselves as champions of critical thought. And they're not like those stupid ass right wingers. They're not like those dumbass Republicans. Those Republicans, oh, they're stupid. They don't read. They're dumb. But then I see this reactionary thinking from them all the time, especially as it pertains to American foreign policy that is uniparty. And that's how you arrive at liberals saying shit like, oh, you don't love it, leave. You're an America hater. The moment that someone criticizes me by saying you're an America hater, I'm like, holy shit, dude, do you hear yourself? Do you fucking hear yourself? What do you mean you're an America hater? How can you think that as a liberal, you care about social justice, you care about you care about human rights and dignity, and then hit that fucking Steven Crowder line so quickly? It came to you like that? It came to you that easily? Oh, you must hate America. If you don't like it, leave. Jesus Christ. It's very frustrating to see those who are supposed to be the first line of defense against growing fascism in this country and globally, seeing that first line of defense basically turned into reactionary weirdos. It's crazy. It's sad. It's a scary state of affairs.